Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Torah study. I am Yaakov in Yisrael, and my co-host, Hakhams Melech and Yaakov, he will be here momentarily. I'm joined with Hakhams.
Shalom, Haham.
Aha,
This is Hakan.
how are you?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very good.
Very good. Okay, wonderful. So today, I have something I have to attend to, so I have to leave promptly at 5 o'clock. So we have about 2 hours.
Okay.
So, if you have any questions, though, we can answer. We probably won't get through the entire parasha today, which is normal. We normally don't get through an entire parasha anyway. But it's good to read as much of it as we can and comment on it as we go. So I'll wait just a few minutes before I begin. Normally I wait till about 5 minutes into the broadcast before I begin to read, so that people can get here. So how's your Shabbat going?
Well, I think nothing special today. I was in the city. Yeah, I just came 30 minutes ago. It's okay. It's very cold here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's cold here too.
And how's your Shabbat going?
My Shabbat is going good. I always have a good Shabbat.
Always, okay.
Yeah. Shabbat is my favorite time of the week.
But you use electronic like your PC, and so it's not an obstacle to do the Shabbat for you, or?
No. Mm-mm. No,
Because
no
the
problem.
Ashkenazi Jews, I think they don't use any computer PC on Shabbat.
Yeah, they have a lot of strange things. They they burn fires during Shabbat when they're not supposed to burn fire.
Yeah.
They say you don't eat meat and milk together, when there's nothing in the Torah that says you can't eat meat and milk together. So they have lots of strange things, but if that's the way they want to do it, that's the way they can do it. There's no problem. But for us, we know that Torah says we're not allowed to do our work, our occupation on Shabbat, and that's what we're not doing.
Okay.
Okay, so we're coming up on 5 minutes. We are in Parashath WaYishlach. That will be Genesis chapter 32, starting at verse 4. Last week we read about Yaakov leaving his uncle Lavan. Now he's heading back to Canaan, and he has to deal with the issue of his brother, because as we know, he didn't really cheat his brother out of the birthright. There might be an issue of the blessing if the two are seen to go hand in hand. We don't really know. But Yaakov was deceptive. He lied to his father and took the blessing of Esau. Esau, of course, was really, really angry, said he was going to kill his brother Yaakov. And so Yaakov fled. He fled to his uncle Lavan, and there he learned a lesson about the rights of the firstborn. And of course, he's now married. He has four wives, and 11 sons now. And so he's on his way back to Canaan, and he knows he has to deal with his brother. So this is where we're picking up in the story today. And so now I will begin. This is verse 4. وَيِشْلَخْ يَعْقُوب مَلْأَخِيمْ لِفَنَاف. Here we go. We finally got Melech. Melech,
Hello.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Hello, Melech.
Hi, who is this? Hakhams.
This is Hakan. Yeah, Melech has problems
Are you ready for
with
some intense Torah
internet
study?
over there.
The internet over there?
No, our internet's fine. Yours is dragging.
Hold on a second. I'm going to fix that.
All right.
Oh, diddle waddies. Hello?
I hear you.
It should be
I
working
can
now.
hear you too.
Hello?
I hear
Hello?
you.
Oh, fungal whoopers. Hello?
Yep, we hear you.
Okay. You see
We hear
me?
you fine. Your video is frozen.
No. I'm going to go out and come back in. I'll be right back.
Okay, no problem. Technical difficulties.
Yes. I want to ask you one thing, Yakov. If I don't mute my microphone and while you're reading from the Torah, does it make any noise or so? Because I want to mute it when I don't talk, you know?
That will be great if you're not gonna be talking or asking a question. Go ahead and mute the microphone, because sometimes we hear echoes
Yes.
and other noises that could be a bit distracting.
Okay.
And but yeah, other than that, anytime you have a question, you can jump right in.
Okay.
Don't feel like you have to raise your hand. I don't think we have.
Yeah, I don't know if
have
there's
that
hand
option.
raising that goes on here. I really don't.
Yeah, just jump right on in.
Yeah,
That's no problem.
absolutely. Hold on, I'm going to just get my computer set up, but you guys can start.
So let me begin again. This is chapter 32, and we're starting at verse 4. ويشلح يعقوب ملأخيم لفناء إلى عيسى أخيه أرسل سعير صدي إدوم. So Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, to the land of Seir. As we know, Seir is a region, a mountainous region in the southeastern part of the land of Canaan, and that was actually taken over. I think they're called the Hori, which I think means like mountain men. But they were basically driven out by Esau, and
now,
so this is where he's
spelled?
going. Huh?
How is Seir spelled?
Seir is spelled Sin Ain Yod Resh.
So what does that mean in Hebrew? It's a question not for you. You obviously know Yaakov, just to the general audience.
Yeah, Seir, that means like a goat or something.
Seir. It means hairy.
Yeah, it's hairy. It's but when we talk about those the hairy goats or whatever, in fact they used to use something of that as an idol, because it says they sacrificed to Seir.
But I was going to say even more than that. the birth of when Esau is born, it said that he was hairy.
Yeah.
And he was given them the land called Hairy.
Well, it's the land of Sa'ir.
Right.
And I don't know if it's named after Esau or not, because it was called Sa'ir. And the what's called in English the Horites, the Horim, used to live there. Hori means a mountain dweller, and so these were mountain men. But I'm not sure. I can't remember if there's a person named Sa'ir. I have to. In fact, I think we'll cover that.
But even if there is a person named Sa'ir, I don't think I don't think it matters, because the point is we see his land is also called Edom.
Yeah,
right. There are two characteristics of
Hairy
Esau when he was born, that he was hairy and red, and his land is called the land of Sa'ir, which means hairy, or the land of Edom, which means red.
So it's a hairy red land.
It's a hairy red land, or it's the land where the hairy red people live. Now, I don't know if this is just
it's the land of
but if
Esau,
you go to,
no matter how you look at it.
Right, but of course. But my point is that it's called that, whether it was another person before or not. We know that a lot of times names in the Torah have more than one meaning, and so for sure, I would say 99% sureness that it's called Seir and Edom, because of those are the two distinguishing characteristics of Esau. Now, I would like to point something out, which is if you ever go to Israel or the Middle East in general, as Volky always points out, he's a very good observer of things along these lines, you will see that there are many, surprisingly so, in the Middle East. You'll see many, not among also among Israelis, but among the quote unquote Arabs. They're not really Arabs. They're much more. Again, as Volky always says, that Arabized Levantines, you'll see a surprisingly large amount of, no, it's really what they are, they're not Arabs, but you'll see surprisingly a large amount of people with red hair. No, red hair.
Yeah, they're hairy too.
It's shocking. If you walk, yeah, well, that's true. But if you walk among the quote unquote Arab populations in Israel, you'll see that okay, this guy looks like your typical, Arab look, dark skin and brown eyes and dark hair. And then, what's that guy doing there? He looks like a redhead, and that's another redhead, and that's another redhead. There aren't that many of them, but there are more than you would expect. So it's possible. Who knows? Just total speculation. You're the genetics guy. It would be interesting to check it out, to grab one of those guys, pin them down, blindfold to take a blood sample, and then take it back to the lab to see.
We've already got enough samples of those guys.
Oh, so we don't have to blindfold them, pin them down, blindfold them?
No, we've already got all their mutations. Yep. Okay, verse 4. ويسوعهم לאמור כה שומרון לאדוני לעשו כה אמר.
But Yaakov, then I have a serious question for you. If they do you have you checked out the DNA of the DNA, genetic sample or the genetic report for any of these red-headed Arabized Levantines? I'd be curious.
They have their all of their mutations are online. You can actually look at them and compare them, and what you're looking for when it comes to like hair, eyes, skin color, your shape of your body, your facial features. That's what's called autosomal DNA, and that's what determines all those factors. What I really care about is the paternal and maternal lines, because that's how you can actually trace a lineage. And
obviously,
because as populations intermarry, and you'll have lots of certain features that are mixed, and when it comes to cultural populations like like Jews or Lebanese or something like that, any or even the Samaritans, especially the Samaritans, because
Mm-hmm.
they will intermarry within their own population more than they would outside, and so those
Right.
populations tend to have what's called homogeny, which is where they don't mix. And so those certain features stay amongst those populations longer.
Right.
Uh, but again, that doesn't really mean that if
Sure,
one
but there must be
happens to
some
leave the
contribution from the
community,
white. There must be some.
with autosomal DNA, there's none at all. The sex chromosomes, uh, the Y chromosome,
Yes,
the
but
sex
there must be some.
chromosome.
Hello.
It's a non-recombine. It's non-recombining. It means
Hello.
it doesn't Yeah, I hear you. I hear you
Oh, okay.
fine.
All right. Go ahead.
The Y
I was going to
chromosome.
say that, but I was going to say there must be some contribution to the phenotype. The external phenotype from
None at
the
all.
Y chromosome.
Not at all.
Really, none.
The only contribution it might possibly give to your phenotype is if you have a penis or not, and that's it.
I think the Y chromosome having many genes on it must code for more than just that.
No, the Y chromosome is a sex chromosome. It's non-recombining with the autosomals, so it has nothing to do with your actual phenotype, your shape, your eye color, any of that stuff. It has only to do with your sex or your male. In fact, only the males have a Y chromosome. The females don't
Let's stay here.
have
Don't
one.
talk. Right. Obviously. But okay, well, that was my first point. I mean, chromosome's a big thing. So I don't know. If you say so, then I'll have to believe you. But I find that a bit hard to believe. It must have some contribution. But the other thing I wanted to say is, even if it's just autosomal, DNA that's causing the red hair and that appearance, the fact that autosomal DNA is running around so much in the Middle East also says something.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I said,
it might.
The phenotypes of certain populations, they're going to mix to a certain point, but then you have certain cultures that don't readily intermarry, and so that's how you keep phenotypes within a population. And that's why when you say like Chinese, everyone thinks of a certain phenotype for someone who's Chinese. The difference is that you can have a Chinese, quote unquote, Y chromosome, and not look anything like Chinese. You won't have any phenotypes at all because that your specific line has moved out of China, lived somewhere else, wherever they happen to live for enough generations without having any other Chinese DNA brought into your line again. And so that's all it is. Whenever it talks about
So let me put it this way.
Population mixing, you're talking about either losing or gaining the autosomal DNA.
Yes, I understand that. But my point is that the fact that there are so many. Okay, if you look among the quote unquote, the Arabized Levantines, then you will not see a lot of blondes, but you will see a lot of redheads. So that says that whatever population they intermixed with, right? Maybe it came from far away. Who knows? Maybe those are, maybe Irish people came down to the Middle East and intermixed with them. But whatever population that is, that population did contribute to the phenotypes of these people. And I'm just speculating, because I don't know the answer, because I haven't done a genetics survey. I'm speculating that the fact that Esav is called Edom and was explicitly, was hairy and had red hair, that maybe that these are Edomites. We know that the Edomites were still a viable kingdom even during Second Temple period time. In fact, they were mass converted during Second Temple period time into to Judaism by who was it now? Was it Herod maybe? I can't remember. One of the kings during the Second Temple period.
The Hasmoneans.
One of the Hasmoneans. I can't remember which one it was. I can't remember which king it was. So one of them force converted all of the Edomites. So, there definitely were Edomites, even even during Second Temple period times that were scooting around the the Middle East there, the Levant. So what is my point? My point is that maybe, and it's just a maybe, that these redheads are remnants of, are descendants of, or have autosomal DNA that comes from Esau. That's all.
Yeah. Esau received his autosomal DNA from his parents. So the gene that actually determined whether he had red hair or not, he received that from his parents, who received it from their parents. He's not the beginning of the mutation that would have been passed along. So that doesn't necessarily mean that anyone who has the gene for red hair had to descend specifically from Esau, but they all shared a similar.
No, of course not. I'm not saying that.
Yeah. But
no, I'm not saying that.
They would all have to. They would all have to
that,
receive the mutation from somewhere, and so that they would have.
Right.
Everyone who has red hair, for instance, would have received that gene from the original person who developed a mutation for red hair, and so that would have been passed along. It does, and that doesn't matter about your lineage. That just it can be from your mother, your father, whoever. But anyway,
sure. But once it appears as a phenotype as a phenotype in somebody, then that phenotype will, wherever it comes from originally, that phenotype will now be passed on to descendants.
It could be passed on or lost. It depends on how the people marry. Like I said, you can have just some rogue person move out of an area carrying all the phenotype genes of one area, go to another area, and they intermarry. Now he's adding his phenotype into that population. Now, what would actually have to happen would be that a certain, just like you do when you breed dogs, you look for a certain trait and you keep breeding that one trait. But what normally happens is when you have just one person that leaves, for instance, those genes from his original population won't really keep going because they don't have enough genes in the gene pool to keep it going. For instance, his children would be marrying amongst that population he's in, and so for every generation he'll lose the original genes and gain the native population genes, and we see that happen time and time again.
Anyway,
in the ancient,
I just find it interesting. I just find it interesting that there are so many redheads running around the Middle East.
You've got a pile of redheads running around Ireland and Scotland too, and all over the place. But and while they had to receive the same mutation that says, "Hey, produce red hair," that doesn't necessarily mean they came from the exact same population.
One second.
So anyway,
yeah.
Verse 3. This is going to be a slow day.
Sorry. You in a rush?
Yeah. I want to get more than 2 verses in before I have to go. ויצא אותם לאמור, כה פומרון לאדוני לעשו, כה אמר עבדך יעקב עם לבן גרתי, ואיחר עד עתה. And he commanded them, saying, "So shall you say to my lord, to Esau, thus said your servant Yaakov, I have resided with Lavan, and I have delayed until now." Again,
By the way, it should also be pointed out that the word that's used there, malachim, is, as we've mentioned in a number of studies, is the word that's used for angels, but it really just means messengers. In fact,
messengers.
angels are usually malachei Elohim or malachei Yehovah, the messengers of God. Here, it just means messengers in the completely pedestrian sense, just human messengers that were sent ahead by Yaakov.
So if you want to do a literal translation, and you want to keep everything the same, well, this basically shows you can't translate the same word identically in every context, especially since the word angel itself comes from angelos, which means a messenger. It means the same thing in Greek. In Arabic, it's called rasul. In fact, that's where you get the word risala, which means a dispatch, a message. But you can't translate it angel, not by today's definition, because when we say angel today in English, it has the idea of some divine being. So context really plays an important part on the understanding of words of the verses, as well as the common vernacular.
Okay, next verse. What are we up to?
We are on verse 5.
32:5.
Yep. ويهني شور وخمور صون وعابد وشفحة وإشلخها لحجيد لأعظني لمسوحين بعناخة. And so I have oxen and mules, flocks, and male servants and female servants, and I wanted to send to inform my Lord so that I can find grace in your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said at the beginning, this is where Yaakov is having to deal with the problem of Esau, because the last he knew, Esau said he was going to kill him. And so
Exactly.
he's thinking, okay, well, now I have to deal with my brother. Let me send this stuff to him and say, okay, here's a little gift, and we'll actually see an interesting play on the word kafar here in just a minute.
And if you look, so 1 second. Look at what he says, the way he speaks to Esau, right? I'm just going to read the English here because I'm having a problem bringing up the Hebrew. So in verse 4, he instructed them, "This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Your servant Jacob says, I've been staying with Lavan and have remained there till now. I have cattle and donkeys and sheep and goats, male and female servants. Now I'm sending this message to my lord that I may find favor in your eyes." So he's being very subservient to his brother, to his older brother. Yep. And obviously the context, as Yaakov said, is because he's worried that Esau still wants to kill him.
So verse 6, ويشوفوا حمل أخين إلى يعقوب لمور بانوا إلى أخيك إلى عيسى وكم حليخ لكراتك و400 إيش يمه. And so
that's definitely not what Yaakov wanted to hear.
Yeah, so now you have to picture the scene. He sends these messengers with all this stuff. Now, evidently, the stuff stayed with Esau. The messengers returned. And it says the messengers returned to Yaakov saying, "We came to your brother, to Esau, and he is also coming to meet you with 400 men."
Right.
So this lets you know that Esau is actually doing pretty good. He's got 400 men.
Sure.
Okay, at his, or at least at his disposal. Whether they're all his servants is not actually clarifying, but he at least has these 400 men at his disposal.
Right.
So, verse 7, وَيِرَى يَعْقُوب مَئُود وَيَيْسِرْ لَهُ وَيَخَسْ את העם אשר איתו ואת הצאן ואת הבקר והגמלים לשני מחנות. And so Yaakov was really afraid, and he thought to himself, or he considered to himself, and so he divided the people that were with him and the flocks and the herds, the camels, into two camps.
Right.
Now, what I want you to pay attention to as we read the next few verses is how he actually divided the camp. We know that according to last week's parasha, that he worked 7 years for Rachel, ended up with Leah, then he got Rachel, then he got the two women. But he loved Rachel. He didn't love Leah. Now that doesn't necessarily mean he hated her or mistreated her.
Actually, Leah is called is called the Snua. She's called the hated one.
The hated. Well, yeah, I guess you do.
But I don't think. But I agree with you. I don't think it literally means he hated her. It just means that
he didn't love her.
The unloved ones, the one that's not the hate, the unloved one.
And so that was the whole reason why Yaakov ended up with so many children, is because from Rachel, he at this point he only had one child, and that was Joseph. All the other children came from Leah, Bilhah, and Zilpah. And
all part of God's plan. God promised Abraham when he changed his name from Avram to Avraham that you will be a Av Lahamon Goyim. You'll be a father of many nations. All right.
Which is interesting how you get Abraham having anything to do with Av Hamon.
With what?
It's called an Av Hamon. But how that equates to Avraham, the only words that's similar is the Av.
Well, you have the hay is added in there, and that's the beginning of Hamon, so Avrahamon, right? So it becomes instead of Avram, it's like Avrahamon, right? And Hamon what? Hamon Goyim. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but at any rate, neither here nor there. That's another discussion. But the point is that when his name was changed, Yehovah promised him that he would be an Av Lahamon Goyim. He would be a father of many nations. And you could say that means a lot of things. You can say that also includes the descendants of Ishmael, includes the descendants of Esau. But
it does.
It might, yeah. It's not contradictory to the fact that it also includes Israel, which became 12 tribes, or 13 tribes if you include the Levites, because Joseph was split into two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. And so this is a fulfillment, and God works in mysterious ways. So by making Rachel barren, and by making Lavan be the deceitful, scumbag that he was, and tricking Jacob, it was actually God's way. Perhaps I don't like to speak in His name, but it was Yehovah's way of fulfilling that prophecy that Jacob would basically be the father of 12 or 13 tribes, which are goyim in a sense, which are nations, which are peoples.
Yeah.
Because as you said, otherwise he probably would have had one or two sons with Rachel, and that would have been the end.
Rachel would have been it.
Yeah,
maybe. Well, we can't really say that.
We
don't know. We don't really know. But anyway, so as we go on, it's really important to pay attention how he actually divides up the camp, because he puts of course, the concubines, or not, I don't even like to say concubines, but he puts the Bilhah Zilpah at the front, and then he puts and their sons with them, and then he puts Leah and her sons in between, and then he keeps Rachel and Joseph with him.
Right.
And
as we see so many times in the Torah, there's clearly a pecking order. There's clearly a hierarchy.
yeah,
It's not even hidden. No one, today we all like to go.
no, it's obvious.
It's damn obvious. And today we all like to go around and pretend that, that everybody's equal and everybody loves everybody the same, and everybody has to be exactly, the same, all that American bullshit. And that's not true. And as I always point out, if you look in any family, you will always see that the parents, usually each parent has a favorite kid, even though they'll never say it or admit it out loud.
Yeah. Yitzhak's favorite was Esau.
For sure.
Rivka's favorite was Yaakov.
That's explicit.
Now whether Yitzhak and Yismael had that, I'm pretty sure there was, because Abraham loved Sarah. He loved her. Okay, and it's obvious how he treated her, and he didn't have any feelings at all for Hagar. All right, he loved Ishmael. Now we'll have to be really careful, because he even pleaded. He's he loved Ishmael, and it's clear in the book, and it really pained him to separate the two. But that had to do with politics and covenant, and but he loved Yitzhak as well, because Yitzhak was actually the legitimate firstborn of the actual wife. The only reason Ishmael would have been the heir apparent would have been if Sarah never had a child. She was taken just to be the surrogate. But once the actual wife had a child, there was no need for the surrogate. And that's why Yitzhak actually had the birthright and the covenant, and that was the whole point. That Sarah said, "I don't want this slave girl and her child to inherit with my son." And that was the whole point. So it had to do with inheritance. Anyway, verse 8. ويومر إم يبو عصام يلحمهاني هات وهكاه وهيا همهاني هنشار لفليتا. And so he says, if Esau comes to the one camp and strikes it, meaning to destroy it, then the remaining camp will be as will be able to escape. Verse 9. ויאמר יעקב אלוהי אבי אברהם ואלוהי אבי יצחק אדוני האומר אלי שוב לארצך ולמולדתך ואיטיב עמך. And so now he cries out to God, and Yaakov says, God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, Adonai, the one who said to me, return to your land and to your relatives, and because I want to make it good with you. This is the cohortative, wa'etiva imma, because I want to make it good with you. Verse 10. قطنتي بكل חסדים ומכל האמת אשר עשית את עבדך כי במחלי עברתי את הירדן הזה ועתה הייתי לשני מחנות. I am too small, I guess, I'm not exactly sure how you would say that. I'm too small from all the chassid. This is the faithfulness and the truthfulness which you have done with your servant. For with my staff I have crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two camps.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 11. Hatzilainina miyad achi miyad Isav ki yarei anochi otho pen yavo wa hikani aim al banim. Save me now from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. And the idea of hand here could also mean from the power of my brother.
Mm-hmm.
For Ki yareh anochi, because I'm afraid of him, because I fear him, lest he comes and strikes me, mother, with the sons.
Which is exactly how he separated the camps, right? He separated the camps
Mm-hmm.
into the mothers and the sons. So he's afraid that, one or more of these camps is going to be.
Oh, I want to make an observation too at this point. Now, Abraham, we don't know. We know he was a rich man. He was very rich, and Yitzhak was even richer. He got richer because he inherited his father's wealth, and then it says he even got richer while he was dwelling in Beersheba and with in it, or Gerar. He was building in Gerar next to Abimelech, the Philistine king. And the point I want to make here is that Abraham, we don't know how many servants he had in total, but we do know that at the time he went and waged war against those 5 kings, he had 314 trained men of war that says were born in his house. And so we know he purchased slaves. He also received slaves from Egypt, and I think also from Abimelech. Then Yitzhak had the same thing. So it says that he inherited everything that his father had. And so here we have Yaakov, who's left his inheritance, which Esau actually had, technically, would have had the main inheritance at this point. Yaakov's gone to Lavan, and there he got his wealth, whatever wealth he's got. It says he has male and female servants. How many he actually has, we don't know. It doesn't actually mention. But the point I'm wanting to get at is that Esau has 400 men. All right. He probably inherited the great majority of those as servants from Abraham and Yitzhak. Yitzhak's dead. Yaakov isn't around, right? He left. So the only person there was Esau. Now, I don't know how his mother would have been with that, whether she would have been the one holding on to the inheritance for Yaakov or not. But I don't know how that works. But the point is, we see he's got 400 men. Now, when Yaakov goes down to Egypt, it's only 70 people. What happened to all those servants? Right? Anyway.
Well, that's his direct. That's his. Hold on, something here. Those are his direct descendants. It doesn't say anything about servants. And the servants wouldn't have been counted. If there were servants, they wouldn't have been counted. I don't think.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. You're talking about people. The servants would also be circumcised, And they were called, for instance, the slaves of Abraham were called the house of Abraham. It says that specifically. But whenever Yaakov goes into Egypt, it's only 70 people even mentioned. Doesn't mention anything about servants or slaves or anything. Did they go down into Egypt with the Israelites? We don't know. Possibly. They took their livestock and everything with them. You would think they would take their servants too. But reading that and you think about the 400 men with Esau, you have to ask yourself, what happened to all the servants? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, where are we?
Right. Okay. Any rate, so
12.
Yep, I'll take this one. So we're 12. Okay. 12. אתה אמרת היטב, היטיב עמך, ושמתי את זרעך ככל הים אשר לא יספר מרוב. And you have said, you said, היטיב imach, I will certainly do good things for you. And again, we have that etiv, that repetition always represents emphasis in the Torah. V'samti et zaracha kechol hayam, and I will literally place, but make your seed. And I always like to point out that seed refers to the male descendants. Seed is the same word as this is in English. Seed in Hebrew means sperm, and sperm is passed from male down through the male patrilineal line. So when it speaks about zaracha, there are one or two exceptions in the Torah where it speaks in the general sense, but generally it's speaking about the male, the patrilineal descendant line. Kechol hayam, as the sand upon the sea, asher lo yisaper merov, which cannot be counted because it's so great, or literally cannot be counted from in number or from greatness, literally. So where did he say this? So now Yaakov is quoting God back to himself.
Mm-hmm.
So where was this original promise? When did God say this to Yaakov?
That was at Bethel.
Yep, that was in I believe chapter 31. If I can find it.
It's at the very first part of Vayetze.
Yeah. Where did it go?
This is 30. No, this is 26.
26. Okay.
Yeah. 14.
Alrighty.
Well, actually, I think this. Yeah. Anyways, I'll read it to you. והנה אדוני ניצב אליו ויאמר אני אדוני אלוהי אברהם אביך ואלוהי יצחק הארץ אשר אתה שוכב עליה לך אתננה ולזרעך והיה זרעך כעפר הארץ ופרצת ים וקדמה וצפונה ונגבה ונברחו בך כל משפחות האדמה ובזרעך.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that. So it didn't say quite the same, but it'd be like the dust of the earth. I guess that's probably even more than the sand of the sea.
Yep. So, okay, I'm sorry, just right in the middle of something. 1 second. Okay, so where were we? Yes. So but there's the place where he says and I think it was in chapter 31, but I can't find it right now. So, all right, it doesn't matter. But he's basically quoting God right back to himself, which is interesting. Let me just see if I can find it. 1 second. I can't find it right now, but it basically that same phrase is used exactly. Okay, so we're up to verse. What verse are we up to?
You want to see that part where he was speaking to the
All right. Okay.
where he says
No, I lost it now. No, it's right past this. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong chapter. That's fine. Okay, so okay, so we're up to verse 13. So we're in chapter 32, verse 13. And he slept there that night. And in modern Hebrew and also in ancient Hebrew, we'll see that it's used in the story with Moses, when Moses is coming back with Tzipporah and their son from Midian to Egypt. The word is used, so you get the word malon from there, which in modern Hebrew is a hotel, and in Hebrew is they usually translate it as inn. V'yalein sham balayla, so that's from the same root as v'yalein. So he slept there that night. Uikach min habab yado mincha le'esav achiv, and he took from his possessions, literally that which had come into his hand, or that which comes into his hand, but the implication there is his possessions. Mincha le'esav achiv, a gift to Esav, his brother. And here's the gift.
This is the second one.
What's that?
And this is the second gift. So he sent the first.
Yeah.
They came back. Now
right.
It doesn't say whether they brought the animals back. We just know that the messengers returned. Whether they returned with the property or not, we don't. It didn't say. But here it says he's making a gift for his brother, and so it seems that this might be a second gift. And then we know shortly that he does this several times.
1 second. Right. So the first time is in the first one we see is in verse 5. Right. So the first time is in chapter 5, and it says he sent bulls and donkeys and sheep, etc., etc. And now we have again, and we're in verse. Oops, I lost it again. Where the heck are we? Here, verse 14. This time it's Izim Matayim, so 200 goats. V'tayashim, and that's usually translated also as goats. So Tayashim Esrim, so 20 goats. I guess maybe a different type of goats, or maybe.
Well, Tiesh is the male goat. The is the female.
Right. Okay. So 200 female goats, 20 male goats. Rachelim, which is usually understood as a sheep or lambs. Rachelim matayim, so 200 lambs. Elim esrim, and deer or ram, something like that. Whatever you say, however you say it in English, I forgot. Elim esrim, and 20 rams, we'll say. Okay. Gmalim menikot, so suckling camels. Ubenehem shlosha parot. Suckling gemalim menikot uvnehem. So I'm sorry, not suckling camels, but lactating camels and their sucklings. Shloshim, so 30 of those. Parot arba'im, 20 bulls. Parim, I'm sorry, 20 cows.
40 cows.
40 cows. My mistake. Uparim asara, 10 bulls. Atonot, esrim. So we've got 20, that's donkeys, specifically female donkeys. Ba'arim, asara, and that's those are male donkeys. So a whole bunch of different things, basically. Now, what I'm trying to determine here is one second. One second here. I just want to see something. It's a poem out of the See, I'm not sure he sent the gifts twice. I think that maybe when he sends the messengers in verse 4, that he says he's going to send gifts, but I don't know if he's sending them at that time. Because he says in verse 5, I have all of these things, and I have sent them, or I will send them, or I'm sending them. Again, it's play on tenses, which is not always so clear. So I'm not sure that he sent it, that he's sending again at this point. I think he's just sending the messenger saying that he's going to send it.
Okay, well, that's possible.
Yeah.
In fact, the way it plays out, it actually makes more sense.
Yeah. One second. Okay, right. So that's that. Okay. We are up to verse 16. Viten biad avadav eder levado. And so he gave each. Eder is basically a flock or a group, I guess you could say. Yeah. So so he gave each of these. He divided these animals up into groups and gave them to each of his servants one by one. Yomer el avadav, and he said to his servants, Ivru lefanai, revach tasimu ben eder uben eder. So go before me, literally pass before me, and put a space. And the word revach is used even in modern Hebrew as a space. So if you want to leave a space when you're typing, you say revach. That's the same word. Urevach tasimu ben eder uben eder. So you place a space, a gap between each flock or each group. V'itzav et harishon lemor, and he commanded the first one, meaning the first servant or the first group, lemor ki yifgashcha Esav, when Esav runs into you, Esav achi, when my brother Esav runs into you, v'she'elcha lemor lami ata, and he asks you, who do you belong to? Where you who are you? Who are you, or who do you belong to? Literally, ve'ana telech ulami ela lefanecha, and where are you going? And to who do these things that are in front of you belong to? Verse 18, ve'amarta la'avdecha liYaakov. You shall say to your servant Yaakov. And again, so Yaakov is instructing his servants to say to Esav, your servant Yaakov. In other words, Yaakov is instructing his people to call Yaakov your servant before Esav. So again, you see just the complete level of submissiveness. And Yaakov, our Yaakov, mentioned the word kofer, and we're going to get to that soon, and I'm going to have a lot to say about it, as perhaps Yaakov will as well. It's extremely important. And you shall say, it belongs to your servant Yaakov. It is a gift that is sent to my master. Okay, meaning to Esav. V'hine gam hu acharenu. And behold, he is after us, meaning Yaakov is after us. Again, a classic example of how Hebrew differs from English. In English, this would be considered an incorrect sentence, incorrect grammar, because you have this clause, V'hine gam hu acharenu, which is referring to Yaakov, which is separated from Yaakov by this intermediate. I guess you could say it starts at mincha hi shlucha la'adoni la'esav. So it goes. So it's talking about the gifts that are sent to Esav, and then it says, and he's behind us, meaning that Yaakov is behind us. So in English, if you were submitting this, if you're submitting the Torah to an 11th grade English teacher, who's a real stickler she would put a red mark through that and say that the modifying phrase should be next to the phrase that modifies, but that's not the way Hebrew works. And as I pointed out many times, this is a cause for a lot of misunderstandings among those who don't know the Torah well, including the rabbis, maybe especially the rabbis. So, Yitzav gam et hasheni, gam et shlishi. So he also commanded the second group and the third group. Gam et kol ha'ochim acharei ha'adarim, and also all of those that were walking or that were going after these groups, these flocks, lemor. That they should say, that you should basically, I'll paraphrase, that you should say exactly the same thing when you run into Esav. So he's really laying it on thick here, right? He's really trying to to appease, to mollify, I think might be the correct word, or to appease. What was it called when they tried to appease Hitler? That was called appeasement, right?
Yeah.
So this is Yaakov's form of appeasement, and surprisingly, it's going to turn out well. It's going to turn out he wasted a whole bunch of camels and cows and donkeys because Esav was so fickle that he'd already long ago forgotten about it. But we'll get to that in a bit, as you all know, I'm sure. Okay. And you shall say, behold, your servant. Again, your servant. That's these people calling to Esav, calling Yaakov your servant to Esav. So again, the submissiveness here, the subservience. Abdecha Yaakov acharenu is behind us. Ki amar achpara panav b'mincha holechet lifanai. Because he said, meaning Yaakov said, or Yaakov thought in this case, thought out loud maybe, achpara panav, literally, I will cover over his face. It's usually translated as I will, what's the word they use? I will send him a ransom, or I will ransom. Usually I think they translate, let's see what the NIV says here. This is verse 20. And be sure to say, your servant Jacob's coming behind us. We thought, I will pacify him with these gifts I'm sending on ahead, which is actually a pretty bad translation. So we'll get to the actual translation. The mincha, it expresses the idea, but it's definitely not a literal translation. The mincha holechet lefanai, with the gifts, or the gift, which in this case is the singular, can represent the whole set of gifts. Holechet lefanai, the gifts that are going before me. Va'acharei ereh panav ulai isa panav. So, one second. Right. So this is what he said to himself. This is basically now Yaakov expressing his reasoning, that he said to himself, I'm going to pacify him with these gifts that are coming before me. And afterwards, when he runs into me, when he sees my face, maybe he will forgive me. Okay? And let's just finish off this little section here, and then we'll go back and talk about verse 20. And so these gifts went before him while he stayed for the night back in the camp. Okay, so the word achpara panav literally means I will cover over his face. Okay, and this word is used it's used many times in the Torah, and the technical aspect of it is that it's usually translated as a ransom, but the basic idea of it is that you are going to give money or a gift or possessions, basically as a substitute for punishment, or for something that would happen to you, and that's why they usually call it a ransom. Okay, so in this case, what it's really expressing is the idea that he's going to cover over his face, meaning like he's going to cover up his eyes so that Esav forgets, when he sees all these gifts, he's going to forget how the punishment or the anger that he had towards Yaakov. And Yaakov, if you want to say something, I'm going to just find some verses here that I'd like to talk about. Just give me a second, but it's going to take me a second, so you can go ahead and say what you want to say about that word, and then I'll chime in a second.
Yeah, the verb kafar means to cover something, and whenever you talk about covering a debt, like if you owe something, even today, you would say, I would like to cover the cost or what would be owed. And you see this word the first time in the narrative of the ark, where Noah's building the ark, and he was told to cover it inside and out with this kofer. And this is the same word here. And so it means to cover something over. And in the Torah, we read about the murderer. There are certain instances when someone who kills like a slave, there could be a kofar offered up, okay? Meaning he could pay a penalty for killing the slave, but he himself wouldn't be put to death. However, in the case of a murderer, it says you're not to take any kofar for a murderer, which means there's no way he could make restitution or pay something that would cover his debt of committing the crime.
Right. So I'd like to turn our attention to a number of verses. Just one second here. Yeah, let's start with where'd it go? Let's start with Numbers, chapter 35, verses 31 and 32. So if we go there for a second, we're going to see something very interesting. Let's have another tab here. Numbers 35, 42. So we'll start in 30 very quickly. Kol makeh nefesh lefi edim yirtzach et harotzeach ve'ed echad lo ya'aneh b'nefesh lamut. So we're talking here about murder, okay? If somebody murders, okay? So verse 30 says, anyone who makeh nefesh, anyone who kills another person, basically, lefi edim yirtzach et harotzeach, according to witnesses, or literally at the mouth, by the mouth of witnesses, shall they murder shall they kill the murderer? But
and that's a very important principle.
It certainly is. So for capital crimes, you need or at least for murder, you need two witnesses. You're not going to and I guess by extension for capital crimes, you don't kill a person based on a single witness. It's not enough. You need two witnesses. Okay. Verse 31. But that's not the point we want to make here. Verse 31. Okay. And you shall not take a and here's the same word we saw the word achpara, panav, I shall cover over his face, and here it says lo kofer lenefesh rotzeach, and literally this is usually translated as you shall not take a ransom for the soul of a murderer, for the life of a murderer, but it's the same word, it's kofer, and the idea here is that for other crimes aside from murder, and we can see this explicitly. I'll give an example afterwards. You can pay off the person you've offended. So if you punch someone in the face and break their nose, right? Then instead of being punished by the judges, or instead of a settlement, instead of reaching a settlement, in that case, you could reach a settlement. You could say, listen, I'm really sorry. I got a little bit out of hand. I was drunk. We were at the pub. I know I broke your nose, and I'm really sorry about that. But here, take $2,500, and let's just forget the whole incident. And the guy says, okay, fine, it's settled, right? So, it's like a form of apology. Sometimes all it takes is an apology. Sometimes you have to pay the person off, and this actually has worked its way down even into modern civil law, right? Whereby whereby if you damage somebody else, let's say in a car accident, it's not necessarily criminal. They're paid for the damage you've done to them, right? Usually by the insurance companies. But here it says explicitly, if you murder somebody, then the murderer cannot use money to pay off those who were or the family in this case of the person who was murdered, right? Obviously, you can't pay off the person who murdered. So usually it's the goel, the redeemer of blood, the goel adam, the redeemer of blood, the nearest of kin, that's now going to come and avenge the murderer. We see this. I don't want to go too far afield, but we see this in the case of the accidental murderer that has to be sent to one of the cities of refuge. But at any rate, in the case of a murder, you're not allowed to pay off the family with money. Okay, that's what verse 31 says. Literally, you shall not take a covering, a monetary covering for the murderer who acted evilly with evil I'm sorry, 1 second. That acted evil and killed, because he will certainly be put to death. In other words, you cannot pay off a murderer with money. You cannot appease. You cannot do what Yaakov is doing to Esau, which is send gifts or send money in order to appease the aggrieved family of someone who was murdered. Rather, the person who did the murdering must be put to death. Motumat will certainly be put to death. Okay. That's something else, criminal, but not relevant here. Okay. So that's the idea here. The idea, whenever you see the word kofer, which again is usually poorly translated into English as a ransom, what it's really talking about is a monetary payment to appease someone who has been wronged by a crime. And according to the Torah, you're allowed to do that for other crimes, but you're not allowed to do that in the case of murder. Let's see if there's anything else I want to see here. Yes, if we go for a second to Genesis chapter 20, verse 16, and then maybe we'll just go on, because otherwise it's going to be a whole hour-long discussion. But Genesis chapter 20, verse 16. So this is the case we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with Avi Melech. Remember, Avi Melech is Avi Melech is constantly seems to be getting into trouble with the women of Abraham's family.
Those dang Hebrews!
Yeah. So the first time
done it again.
Yeah, those damn Jews. I actually remember we went to Volky remembers for sure very well. We went to Akko, which is in northern Israel, and they had this very, very, very interesting museum of it was a replica with like a live narration, and sometimes they had like these moving robots or moving mannequins, live replication of a Turkish bathhouse, because of course the Turks, as I'm sure Hakan must know, ruled over Israel from basically from the early 1500s until 1917, when at the end of World War I, when the Ottoman Empire was basically disassembled by the British, since the British were on the winning side of World War I and the Turks were on the losing side. But the Ottomans ruled over the land of Israel from the early 1500s, starting with Suleiman the Great. I always get Salah ad-Din and Suleiman the Great mixed up. I believe it was Suleiman the Great who actually ended up building the walls. The current walls that you see around the old city of Jerusalem were built by the Turks. No, they were not built by King Solomon. No, they were not built by Herod the Great. They were built by the Turks in the 1500s by Suleiman the Great, who actually was very favorable towards the Jews. At any rate,
yeah, he was the one that allowed them to move back.
see, was it him or was it Salah ad-Din? I always get the two confused.
I think it was him because
Yeah.
you remember they were ordered not to even live in
Right.
Israel,
Right.
because of the Romans.
I always get my history a little bit confused there, but if I remember correctly, it was the Crusaders who, when they took over the Holy Land, the quote-unquote Holy Land, they kicked the Jews out. They closed down the Karaite synagogue that was there at the time, and then Salah ad-Din came, and he was the one who basically led the rebellion against the Crusaders, threw the Crusaders out of Jerusalem, and reopened the Karaite synagogue. So I think it was Salah ad-Din, but you might be right. I always get the events of Salah ad-Din and Suleiman the Great mixed up, but I am sure that Suleiman the Great did build the walls around Jerusalem that you see today. So when you go there, it's not some great Jewish work of art. It's actually a Turkish work of art. So Hakan, thank you very much. And so to make a long story short, what the heck was I saying? Now I totally forgot what I was saying. How did we get onto the Turks? I can't even remember. Oh yes, I was going to tell about when we visited Akko in the northern city of. Okay, let me unwind quickly. When we visited this replica of a Turkish bathhouse in the northern city of Akko, there was this one mannequin that was mannequins of a couple of Turks talking at the bathhouse, and they said something about they said those sneaky Jews. That's what they said. So you always remember that. So getting back to the sneaky Jew thing, that's how we got off on this tangent. So getting back to the sneaky Jew thing, what were we talking about? I've gone into
Sarah. We were talking about Sarah.
That was it. Thank you.
It'd be Likasut Anayim.
Yes, we're talking. Oh, that's right. We're talking about how Avimelech was always getting in trouble with these sneaky Jews. Okay, and therefore, to get back to what we really wanted to talk about was in verse 15. It says, verse 16. Sarah Amar Hine Natati Elef Kesef Lachicha. So Avimelech, who had kidnapped Sarah, thinking he was only Abraham's wife, Abraham's sister, said, "L'Sarah Amar." So to Sarah he said, Avimelech said, "Hine natati elef kesef. Behold, I've given 1,000 bricks of silver. Lachicha, to your brother, to Abraham. Hine hu lach ksut einayim, and this is for you a covering of the eyes. L'kol asher itach v'kol nochachat." Okay, basically it's a covering of the eyes for all that has happened. And here we have the word again, instead of using kofer, which also means covering, we have another word which explicitly means covering. Lichasot, even in modern Hebrew, means to cover. We have kisut einayim, okay, a covering of the eyes, and it's expressing exactly the same idea as kofer, that you use money. Here, Avimelech is using 1,000 talents or 1,000 units of silver to pay off Abraham so that he'll forget the whole incident. And it's called kisut einayim. It's called the covering of the eyes, and that's the idea that we have here in Genesis 32 with this word here that is being used. And I lost the verse again. There it is in verse 20. Gam hine avdacha Yaakov acharenu. You shall say to him, "Behold, your servant Yaakov is coming after us." Ki amar achfara panav. Literally, I will cover over his face. Okay, I'm going to take his eyes and cover them over, and he's just gonna, figuratively speaking, forget what I did to him. And that's the idea. Whenever you see the word kofer or lichpor in this context, it means paying someone off so they can forget. And by the way, that's also where we get the word kippur. And that's where we get the holiday Yom Kippurim. And Yom Kippurim, we're basically paying off God in a certain sense, not with money, because that would be disgusting, number one, and God does not need our money. But we're paying off him with paying him off, quote unquote, or we're covering over his eyes, making him forget our bad deeds by showing how remorseful we are, and we do that by fasting. We do that by having a solemn day of prayer and fasting, and all of this stuff. So this is also related to the word Yom Kippurim. Okay, that's all I wanted to say about that. Yaakov, do you want to say anything?
No, I think we covered it.
Yeah, we definitely covered it.
Yeah, we covered it.
That's for sure. Too much.
No pun intended. But,
right.
yeah, but I think we pretty much got the understanding out.
Yeah.
So where were we actually? Oh yeah, the last clause of verse 20. Ulai Yisa Panai. We see this word Yisa. All right, it comes from the root nasa, which means to carry, and literally it means will lift up. Okay.
Right.
But you see this used lots in the Torah, especially in the narrative of Israel coming out of Egypt, going through the wilderness, especially during the times of the wilderness, how God bears their iniquity. Okay.
Right.
And this is the word that they use. This used so often. It means to basically, just deal with it. You have to live with it. Is basically what he's getting at. You're just going to have to carry my injustice. You'll have to carry my insult. You're just going to have to deal with it and let it go. And that's the idea that's happening here. He's saying, "Hey, look, you might have felt insulted or outraged, but take this and deal with it.
Right.
Get over it."
And as it turns out, as I said before, Yaakov's going to find out that he wasted all his money because Esau was ready to forgive him anyway. And it reminds me very interesting. Yeah, no big deal. He's it was worth it, but it was.
It was probably a good idea that he left when he did, but
right.
You have to ask yourself, would he really have killed his brother? I don't think Esau would have really killed him, but you never know.
I don't know. He
was pretty mad. You could see that was really terrible, sorrowful stuff that he was saying to his father, and you could tell the agony he was in. But if Cain killed his brother, you never know.
Rivka instructed Yaakov to get the heck out of there. I don't think she would have done that unless she thought his life was seriously in danger. And we know that Esau was we know he's a very impulsive man. We know he's a professional. He was a professional hunter, right? And
he was definitely used to hunting and killing.
Yeah. He's never presented. He's never presented in a good light ever. Not once. I don't think throughout the entire Torah. He's just presented as a kind of violent, impulsive human being.
He I don't know about impulsive, but it does say that he was sorry that he married the Canaanite woman. He realized after he married these women how it made him stink in the eyes of his parents, because he heard
his impulsiveness.
Yeah. Well, he probably did it without even thinking. You're right.
Comes into his mind, and then he worries about the consequences later. Just like with the nazid, with the excuse me, with the porridge. Give me the stuff right now. Just eats it and then worries about the consequences later. And then he gets pissed off over the consequences that he himself caused because he couldn't control himself when he came in from the field.
It's interesting too that at this point, it was Esau who was the first from the family of Abraham. From Abraham and Isaac, because we know Ishmael married an Egyptian woman. But for Abraham's line through Isaac, Esau was the first to marry outside of the family. Abraham married possibly well, we know it's more possible, married his sister. That was definitely the
Right.
same family. His son married his first cousin, and then his grandson also married his first cousin. But then you have Esau who married
Mm-hmm.
a Canaanite woman, and from that point on, we see that
Mm-hmm.
they stopped going back to the actual family and started marrying amongst the Canaanites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alrighty. So, yeah, I was going to point out one more thing. This is just a thought, totally aside, but very quickly. So this idea of Yaakov does all of these things. He sends all of these gifts, and then he finds out in the end that he really didn't need to send them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of the idea of a neder, that when you're in deep trouble, sometimes you'll make a neder to God, right? I know this has happened to me a number of times in my life. Not necessarily trouble, but when I was hoping to show God my seriousness about a certain issue, or show him that I really hoped he would help an outcome be a certain way, I would make a certain neder, which usually would be in the form of a promise to give a certain amount of money to charity. And then what's happened a number of times is that the outcome did come out that way, and it came out very easily. And then I said to myself, oh wow, I really, now I really have to give away this whatever, let's say $500. Wow, that was easy, and
It's probably
shit,
because you
if I'd
did.
known it was gonna be that easy, I wouldn't have probably. Yeah, now what do I do? I really, now I got what I wanted from God, right? Or from, the outcome came out as I wanted, and now I'm down $500, and I'm, or I'm gonna be down $500. And I said, well, I really didn't need to, this would have come out even if I didn't promise $500. What I'm trying to say is there's this incredible temptation at that point to not pay the money. Thank God I've always overcome that temptation, and I always have. But it just reminds me of a similar situation. Basically, what he's doing here is he's in a sense, he's worried. Yaakov is in a state of panic, and he wants to make a certain outcome occur. And he thinks, so he's taking a chunk of his possessions to, out of fear, and out of desperation, and out of fear, and out of worry, and sending them off, just giving them away. And then later he finds out, oh well, that was easy. It actually, I didn't even really need to do that. It would have worked out. Looks like it would have worked out anyway. And oh damn, now I gave away, now I gave away a whole bunch of my, crap, and I'm not getting that back. That sucks. Kind of thing. Anyway, that's just kind of my observation. It's relation to a netter.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Jacob, you can continue if you want.
Okay, hang on. I was just looking at something. So, 21, finally.
Yeah.
وتعبر همنها على پناه وخولان بليله بمحانه. And so he sent over the gift before him, but he remained in the camp that night. ويقوم بليله ويقح شتي نساو وإت شتي شفخثاو وإت أحد عصر يلذاب ويعبر إت معبر يبوك. And so he stood up in that night, and he took his two wives. Now this is interesting what it says. ويقح إت شتي نساو. He took his two wives.
Mm-hmm.
وإت شتي شفخثاو, and his two servant women, which were the mothers of the rest of the sons, and his 11 sons, and he crossed over the ford of Yabok. ويقحيم ويعذرين اتحناحل وَيَعْذِرْ et asher lo. And so he took them, and he sent them over the Nahal, the river, and he sent over all that he had.
Mm-hmm.
ويوثر يعقوب لوحده, and Yaakov continued alone. Now, this is interesting. This word yuwathir, it comes from yathar, which actually had an original root, wathar, and we actually have that in Arabic. And there's actually a prayer that's done in the night. You stand up at midnight and you pray throughout the night. It's called the witr, Salatul Witr. I'm sure Hakan understands that. But it means the continuing prayer or something like that. But we have the same word here. Anyway,
yeah, in modern Hebrew, more more is yoter, and also they use this word also is very 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 common word. Yivater, yivater also means exactly the same thing, to remain.
ויהווה איש עמו עד עלות השחר. And it says, and a man wrestled with him, or contended with him, until the rising of the morning, or of the dawn. Now, it doesn't say who the man was, where the man came from.
Right.
Doesn't even mention that a man came. It just said, oh,
right.
There he was.
Yeah.
But we know he was called an angel. And I think it's one of the prophetic writings, Amos, maybe. I think it is. Well, yeah.
I'll play
Kilo Yakolo.
Yeah, go ahead.
ويقع بكف يريخو وتقع كف يارك يعقوب بأبقو إمو. And he saw that he was not able with him. He's not. Now this is the man, evidently, saw that he wasn't. He didn't have any power with him. He wasn't able to do whatever it is he was trying to do. And it says he touched him on the calf of his Yerecho, which is usually his thigh. What they call and so it was ruptured. The calf of his thigh was Yaakov was ruptured as he was wrestling with him. So whatever this was, it wasn't a vision. Right? Couldn't have been a vision. You don't get hurt by visions, do you? Couldn't have been a vision.
Right. That's right.
ويومر شلحيني كي على الشاخر ويومر لو أشلحخ لو أشلحخ كي بeraktani. And so he says, send me away because the dawn is rising, or the dawn is risen. And he said, this is Yaakov now replying to this man.
Hold on a second. there. יוותר יעקב לבדו, עד עלות השחר, עד עלות השחר. Okay, and of course that was the famous Shlomo Karbach, and that was him singing that verse right there. That was verse 32, chapter 32, verse 24. Sorry, Yaakov, go ahead. We got to have a little bit of a break every once in a while.
So we're on 26.
So,
ويومر شلحيني كي على حشاخر ويومر لو أشليحخ كي بيرختاني. And he says, send me away because the dawn has risen. And he said, this is Yaakov speaking to him. He says, no. He says, I will not send you away. Rather, or key M normally is used in like unless or rather or something like that. But here it means unless you blessed me. وَيَوْمَرْ Elav. And so this is the angel speaking to him. مَا شَمَيْخَ وَيَوْمَرْ Yaakov. And so he asked him, what is your name? And he said, Yaakov. وَيَوْمَرْ Lo Yaakov ye'amer od shemcha. Yaakov shall no longer be said as your name. Ki im Yisrael. Now here is what I was talking about. You have the ki im. So when you see this ki im, normally it means like rather or but Israel. Ki saritha im Elohim wa im anashim wat tuchal. Because you have
usually translated as struggled.
Struggle, yeah. You have struggled with God, and
it's usually the way it's translated, yeah.
And prevailed. وَيِسْأَلْ يَعْقُوبَ وَيَوْمِرْ هَجِدَنَا شَمَيْخَ وَيَوْمِرْ لَمَّا زَي تِشْأَلْ لِشْمِي وَيَvārech أُفُ Sham. And so Yaakov asked, and he says, please tell me your name. And he said, what for? Why do you ask for my name? And so he blessed him there. ويقرأ يعقوب شم همقوم פניאל כי ראיתי אלוהים פנים אל פנים ותנסל נפשי. Now this is the same thing that's said later of the Israelites, that God spoke to them panim el panim, face to face when he appeared on the mountain. But here
said about Moshe as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
That he spoke to God face to face, like a person speaks to his own friend. Yeah.
And so here we see that here again in the case of Yaakov. And so Yaakov called the place Peniel, which means the face of God, because I've seen God face to face, and my life was spared. ويزرع له الشمس كأشر عذار את פניאל وهو סולע על יריחו. And so the sun shone out as he crossed Peniel, and he was limping upon his thigh. He was limping as he went.
Yeah. All right. I'd like to say a couple of things here. Just going back
Mhm.
a bit, a couple of important things. So, first of all, okay. First of all, I want to look at Robert Alter because he has a couple of interesting things to say. Oh shoot! Oh damn it! I just lost that page. 1 second.
It's all right.
1 second.
No problem.
Yeah. So the first thing is that the first thing he mentions is that when Abraham's name was changed from Avram to Abraham, it was permanent. He's never ever called Avram again. But Jacob is sometimes called Jacob and sometimes called Israel, which I thought was very interesting. Right, so it says here, thus Israel does not really replace his name, but becomes a synonym for it. A practice reflected in the parallelism of biblical poetry, where Jacob is always used in the first half of the line, and Israel, the poetic variation, in the second half. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Hello?
Can I ask a question, please?
Okay. And then I'm just going to read his comment about striven with God, because I want to talk about this a little bit on my own. So he says the Hebrew term Elohim is a high concentration point of lexical ambiguity that serves the enigmatic character of the story very well. It is not the term that means divine messenger, but it can refer to divine beings, whether or not it is prefixed by sons of, as in Genesis 6. It can also mean simply God, and in some contexts, could this be one? It means gods. I don't think so. I disagree with that. But at any rate, in a few cases, it also designates something like princes or judges, but that is precluded here by its being antithetically paired with men, right? It is not clear whether the anonymous adversary is referring to himself when he says Elohim or to more than human agents encountered by Jacob throughout his career. In any case, he etymologizes the name Yisrael, Israel, as Yisrael is a rare one, and there is some question about its meaning. Educate prevail. Okay, so I'd like to say a couple of things here, which is this name Yisrael that we see here. Okay, so the name Yisrael, which is usually translated as we said, is Anashim v'tuchal. So the first thing that Robert Alter points out, which is clear, is that we have Elohim va'im Anashim, right? So with God and man. And the fact that Elohim is contrasted with the word Anashim shows that we're talking about either God or divine creatures or something like that. And I think it is clearly speaking here about God. And what's going on here is that Jacob symbolically wrestled with this angel, right? The angel represents God, right? He's God's messenger. So physically happening in this world, which is actually ironically, that's the symbolism. That's not what's really happening. The symbolic aspect is Yaakov wrestling with this angel of God, right? So on a physical basis, Yaakov is physically wrestling with God. But that's only a metaphor. The physical, this time it's reversed. The physical action is basically the metaphor with what's going on, and that's what the angel said when he gives Yaakov his name. That this physical fight with the angel represents Yaakov wrestling with men and with God. With Tuchal, and you emerge victorious, or you have won. So what's this idea of wrestling? Okay, wrestling with men we can understand. There are a lot of nasty people out there, and you have to fight them sometimes. Certainly we just saw in the previous verses that Yaakov has wrestled with his own his own brother in a sense, Esav, and he's wrestled with Lavan. So he's had a lot of doings with other people, and each time he's come out victorious. The Tuchal. Well, what about this idea of wrestling with God? And so I think this is a very deep and complicated subject, and I definitely don't want to go on a long 20-minute philosophical diatribe about it. But to sum it up, I think what we're talking about is that God forces us, for those who wish to achieve spiritual greatness in this world, we are going to be God is going to put a lot of challenges before us, and we're going to find ourselves, in a sense, constantly struggling, constantly dealing with very, very strange and extreme challenges, and that, in a sense, is wrestling with God, wrestling with all of these things that God puts before us. That's one possible explanation. Another possible explanation is opposing God. We've seen that many of the greats have opposed God. We saw the example a couple of weeks ago when Abraham opposes God in his decision to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and bargains him down to 10 people, which it turned out there weren't even that. So it was destroyed. We see that Moses, on a number of occasions, argues with God about killing off all the Israelites and starting a new nation based on him. So much so that he says, "You're going to do that, then just erase me from your book," right? Which again implies that the Torah is written by Yehovah, but that's another story. At any rate, so this idea of wrestling with God may mean literally sometimes fighting with God. To get clarity, or to for standing up even to God for what one believes is right. But I think so. That's a second explanation. Okay, so it might mean struggling with all the problems that Yehovah puts before us, especially those who are trying to walk on a path of spiritual, trying to walk with him, or to walk on a path of spiritual enlightenment. Secondly, it might mean fighting against some of God's decrees, because you believe that there's something morally wrong, right? We remember Abraham's cry to God, "Hashofet olam lo yaseh mishpat." Shall the judge of the universe not do justice? Right? He's questioning God's own morality, right? It's unbelievable when you think about it. I mean, here's Abraham, and he knows, he's the way he speaks is also, you could see he's almost in trepidation saying this stuff, but he just has to say it. His morality is crying out to him from deep within to say even God is wrong here, right? I mean, that's a very strong sense of, ironically, that's a very strong sense of godliness to be able to even question God. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it's true, right? What?
Yep. I mean, he's got a big old pear hanging to stand before the creator of the universe.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Absolutely. But it wasn't that he had a big old pear.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It wasn't that he had a big old pear. He wasn't being bold. He was doing it for something deeper than trying to have, to be a tough guy. He was doing it because something deep inside called out to him, saying that that something's wrong here. And that's, in a sense, the ultimate sense of morality, that you have such a strong sense of morality that you can, your moralities, you've internalized God's morality so deeply that you can even question when God himself is acting incorrectly, right? So it's a long discussion,
I don't think we have to get into it now. He had a really strong sense of justice.
Right and wrong. He had a strong sense of right and wrong. Where did you get that from?
Yeah. I'm pretty
sure
God.
So much so that he's arguing against God. It's ironic. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, as Abraham was even asking those questions, he was probably terrified out of his mind. But that's where you get
It's clear
courage.
He was.
Yeah, that's where you get courage.
Right.
That even though you're terrified, you do the right thing. And that's why God loved Abraham so much. Because here this man is terrified, but because he has such a strong sense of righteousness, he spoke up regardless. And so that's why when you look in the Torah, the idea of God's justice is one of the main themes, and we are told we have to be just. We can't have two different measures. We can't have two different weights. We can't. It says stretch justice. You can't stretch the justice, or you can't recognize faces, which means you can't play favorites. You have to be just. And anyway, look, I have about 10 more minutes.
Avram. Okay, I'm just gonna make it really quick, and then we can go on. But that's so Abraham. So someone who's fighting against God has such a deep sense of God's justice and morality that he even will fight literally against God himself sometimes, right? And then the third point I want to say, and I think this is maybe the most likely explanation, is that if you think about like a father and a son relationship, which is essentially our relationship with Yehovah, with God, right, or child-father relationship, a lot of times, when you're growing up with your child, you're growing up in your father's house, there's a lot of struggle. There might even be constant fights depending on the family or the stage of development that the child is in, like if he goes into his teenage rebellious stages, right? So there's a lot of struggle between child and parent, with the ultimate goal of the parent trying, of the ultimate goal of the parent teaching the child ultimately right from wrong, so that he can stand on his own, as Avraham did, and have his own internal sense of right and wrong. So that's also what it might be referring to, that this struggle that Yaakov has with God is a process of a child struggling with a parent to ultimately grow and to increase in his spiritual knowledge, increase in his walk with Elohim, litalech im Yehovah, to walk with Yehovah, and that may be referring to that. So just a couple of ideas that I throw out there regarding what this really means, V'sarita, or this name Yisrael, V'saritim Elohim Adam V'tuchal. And the interesting thing here, again, to reiterate, is that the actual physical wrestling with the angel, the actual physical wrestling with God, because an angel is sometimes interchangeably used with the word Yehovah or with the word Elohim. The angel represents God, is actually the metaphor. It's actually the figurative aspect of the story, and the real aspect of the story is Yaakov's struggle with all of these different aspects to perfect himself. And now he's coming back to the land of Israel after this long struggle for many years with Lavan, and now he's going to basically start the next chapter of his life, so to speak. Okay, go ahead, Yaakov.
Hakan, he had a question earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I have the following question: why is Yaakov called Yisrael, and why doesn't God permanently call him Israel? He's switching between Yaakov and Israel, like Melech said. But what is the reason for this?
Yeah, well, we know that he called him Yisrael, and it is explained here is because he had a certain power with both God and men. And why he changes back and forth from Yaakov and Yisrael, we don't know, but they're basically synonymous. And that's something I can't really answer. But there's something there's something I would like to point out is this angel is not actually called Peniel, but the place is called Peniel. But I like,
the angel's name is never given. The angel refuses to give his name.
But what I would like to point out is this angel. He's called Malachi in Shemot. Mm-hmm. He says, "I'm sending my angel before you," and then later in the same book in Shemot, he says, "I'm sending my Panai, my presence." When we read Isaiah, I think it's in chapter 66, where Isaiah is talking about, he's lamenting what's going on. He says, "Let me talk about the earlier days, the days of Moses, and so forth." He says he put his Holy Spirit amongst them, and he called this Holy Spirit, this Ruach Chodesho, the Malach Panav, okay, which is the angel of his presence. And I always thought that was really peculiar, how we see the angel here with Yaakov. Yaakov recognizes this is the face of God. This is Peniel, even though he doesn't call the angel that. named the place Peniel because I saw the face of God. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It says he spoke with God, panim il panim. Right? It says that Moses spoke the same way, in all of Israel, panim il panim, before the mountain. This angel was in the pillar of fire, and he is often interchanged. Sometimes he's called the Melech Adonai, sometimes it's called Adonai. There seems to be a correlation there, and I've always looked at it as being the actual physical representative of the person who is the reality that we call God in the physical realm. Remember when Moses says, show me your kavod, and he says nobody can see my penai and live, right? Well, whoever Moses was speaking that's not the kavod, but that's the kavod that's called the kavod Adonai that the Israelites saw. They saw the kavod Adonai as this column of fire. It says that they saw the kavod Adonai as a consuming fire upon the mountain. It says anytime the pillar of fire was at the Mishkan, that was the kavod Adonai. And so whatever Moses was speaking with and saw, it says that that's not the kavod, because Moses says, let me see your kavod. If that was the same thing, you understand, he wouldn't be asking him to see it because he's already looking at it. Also, one other thing is that when Aaron and Miriam had this questioning of his prophethood, God says, look, I speak to Moses face to face, and he sees the form of the Tamunat Adonai. He sees this Tamunah, okay, this form. So I've always asked, what is the form? We're told never to make any kind of physical representation, right? But here it is. Moses saw something, and it's called a Tamunah. And so I always look at this Melech Adonai as being the physical, the Tamunah of God in the physical realm. He's not, because we can't actually see the reality of who God really is. All we can see is this physical form that we're able to see and understand and comprehend. But that's where I think it's Daniel Al-Khamuzi come up with the same idea. And he saw the same things. And I think he took it a little bit too far, maybe. But he had a great point. But look, it's 5 o'clock. I really would love to stay and keep talking with you guys all day, but I actually have something.
Yaakov, I could just make one very
go right ahead.
1 minute, so very 1 minute point about Hakan's question. So the question was, once again, why is Israel still, have two names afterwards, and he didn't lose his original name Yaakov? And I think just one clear observation is that if you look at the previous changes in names, meaning Avram to Avraham and Sarai to Sarah, those are similar names to what they had before. Avram sounds like Avraham. Sarai sounds like Sarah. In the case here, we have a completely different name. So it's Yaakov is changed to Yisrael. The two sound absolutely nothing like each other. So I think this implies that it's a different type of name change here. In other words, that this is not just an addition to the previous name. It's not like his name was changed from Yaakov to Yahakov or something like that, as in the case of Avram. It's that he's given another name in addition. That basically one is his original name, and one is his new, you should say, I don't know, nickname maybe, but it's more than a nickname. His name of royalty. What's the wrong word? His name that he gets now that he's achieved a certain status in his spiritual quest. Yeah, in his spiritual quest. And maybe it would be like, I don't know, when you join a club, you come in with the name. I don't know. Maybe an example would be, when I grew up, my English name was Michael, and I always had the name Melech that was given to me by my parents, but I never really used it except in Hebrew school. But then when I went to Israel, I retained the name Michael, but I started using, my new name, my newly refound name was Melech, and that really expressed to me much more my essence than Michael. So maybe it's the same kind of, and that was a a direct consequence of my spiritual quest. That's what brought me to Israel in the first place. So maybe something along those lines, that this is a representation of this new name, this new title, or this new name that Yaakov gets as he continues his spiritual quest upwards. Anyway, that's my thought.
Yep.
So
Could be.
is it possible, Melech, one more question.
Sure.
Is it possible that God in the Torah
Yeah.
called him Yaakov as an individual human being? And Yaakov goes through a process, as I can see it. And as the head of a collective group,
Yeah.
Israel.
Oh, we're called B'nai
Well,
Yisrael. We're also
it's
called
interesting
B'nai
you should
Yaakov.
mention that, because true. However, it is interesting to mention that. I'm going to read Robert Alto's comment here. It says,
Maybe
and this is verse 30.
Why there is a switch in the Torah? He is called Yisrael, and then again Yaakov, and there is a switch. So there must be maybe a new switch, or am I wrong?
Well, I'm going to read. Oh shoot, I lost it again. 1 second here. I'm going to read Robert Alter's comment regarding verse 33, which speaks about the eating of the Gidon Nashet. It's usually translated as the sciatic nerve, and he says this concluding etiological notice is more than a mechanical reflex. For the first time after the naming story, the Hebrews are referred to as the children of Israel, and this dietary prohibition observed by the audience of the story to this day marks direct identification with or reverence for the eponymous ancestor who wrestled through the night, the man who was no man. Anyway, the point here is that soon after, right after, literally in the verse after, a couple of verses after Yaakov is given the name Yisrael, we see for the first time the phrase B'nai Yisrael, and that occurs in verse 32.
Yeah.
Right?
I wouldn't put too much.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put too much into trying to figure out, why they use this name versus that name. There must be some kind of secret, hidden, mysterious something, because you see, Esau's called Esau. He's also called Edom. He's called Seir, and depending,
right.
What part of the Tanakh you're reading, he's called Edom. He's called Esau, and there's no indication of him having any special signification of why he's called Esau or why is he called Edom. And it's just like Shlomo. Shlomo's called Shlomo, but he was also called Yedidiah, I think, which is similar to the name of his father, David. And so, why people have different names, there's just like me. My name is Yaakov. That's my, in English, my name is Jacob. Okay, but it's Yaakov. And, people call me Jake. They call me Jack. Even James or Jim is a form of Yaakov. And even Kobe. You say Kobe, that's another pet form. And there's no reason why anyone would call anybody by a certain name at a certain time. And what we have to stop doing, and we see this a lot, and it's because of Kabbalistic influences, is trying to look behind every single dot or letter or word in the Tanakh and think that there has to be something more, when really there isn't. Sometimes you can get into etymologies, why certain words used here as opposed to there, but to think that there must be some kind of deeper spiritual meaning in it, then that's not really true, and that's a terrible rabbit hole to fall into. But anyway, look, I have to go, and I'll be leaving my house. So I can't leave the computer on because I won't be able to turn off
Yep.
the broadcast. So unfortunately, I have to end it now. It's been a great study. Like every Torah study we have is wonderful. I really appreciate them, and I appreciate everybody joining.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Yep.
Thank you very much.
But we'll do it again next Shabbat.
It was a great stuff. Amazing stuff. It really. This is the highlight of my week. I just love this stuff. Yep. We will do it again next Shabbat for sure.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Shabbat Shalom, Shavuot
All right,
Tov,
Yaakov.
and
Shabbat Shalom.
Lahitvarot.
Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Hakan.
Shabbat Shalom, Melech.
Lahitvarot.